If there was a perfect example of why no Kenyan should ever put their emotions on a particular political candidate, then that lesson came out clearly yesterday, or rather in the last 2 days. Handshake principal Raila Odinga visited Burma market. Now, Burma market is very famous for nyama choma and mandazis bigger than the size of any Kenyan's head. And what was super fascinating is the imagery of what happened at the same Burma market when President Kenyatta visited on 1st September 2017, shortly after David Maraga and the Supreme Court had nullified his election. If I can quickly remind you, that day the president, who was visibly drunk, was breathing fire. And had Raila Odinga appeared on that scene, he'd have been lynched. Yes. Now fast forward to the present. At the same Burma market, Raila Odinga appears. And who is right next to him? Who rides in the same car as him? Nairobi Senator, and very close friend to the president, Johnson Sakaja. And Raila receives a rousing reception, very similar to that President Uhuru Kenyatta received on 1st September 2017. And this drama unfolds less than 2 years after the first one. So who's left with egg on their face? It is the crowd. It is me and you. It is we who support politicians who are left with egg on our face. But there's something that was much more significant about Raila Odinga's visit to Burma, which I want to bring to your attention. You see, the handshake team is in a dilemma. They have a problem, a very serious political problem. And what happened at Burma, 2 days ago, was just political chess. Because now it is high-stakes political chess in Kenya. And we will discuss that super fascinating, chess in a moment. But first, let us focus on something Raila Odinga mentioned at Burma market. The referendum. Oh yes, the referendum is at our doorstep. Because this morning, the IEBC, the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission, has started verifying the signatures, which were filed for referendum. And not by the Building Bridges Initiative, but by a party, a political party, called Third Way Alliance, which collected 1.4 million signatures, more than enough, to trigger a referendum. And what they want to change in the constitution is fascinating. They want to reduce the members of parliament, punguza mzigo, from 416 to only 147. The other major proposal they have has to do with the presidency, where they want to change the presidential term from 2 5-year terms to 1 term of 7 years. Now, I believe we all know that when this referendum bill lands in Parliament, that's when the real drama will start unfolding. It is like a private company calling a meeting to discuss how they're going to downsize, let people go. And the people who are deliberating on this are the people who are going. For instance, you're the deputy chief accountant, and therefore the deliberations reach the point where you're discussing how relevant or how significant is this post of deputy, because it's one which needs to be scrapped. And so as deputy chief accountant, you find yourself bang in the middle of a discussion of why your post should not exist. Gosh, that is going to be drama. Because the truth is, members of parliament are having fun, at our expense. They're drawing huge allowances, huge salaries, which they keep on increasing all the time. And then on weekends, they get allowances from either of the sides in the political divide, kieleweke or tanga, to go out into the countryside and insult people. Not to mention the frequent travels abroad, on alleged benchmarking tours. That is why, in my view, I don't see the referendum happening this year. I don't see how. And let us not even attempt to open the can of worms called, how will this referendum be financed? Where will the money come from? Anyway, let's leave that aside. Now, the handshake team has a problem. What kind of problem do they have? Actually, a super fascinating political problem. Because the fight against corruption must continue. But the mood in the country is ugly. And of course, political players, especially experienced hands like Raila Odinga, are very much aware of this. And this next thing I'm going to tell you is going to shock you. And it is this. As much as the Tanga team looks like it's on its last legs, the kieleweke guys cannot afford to completely finish off the Tanga team. Oh yes, I said that. You see, in politics, for you to thrive, you need an enemy. And the more you can get your supporters to hate that enemy, the better, the easier it is for you to arrive at your agenda. Now, let me illustrate this before I get you even more confused. And let me illustrate it with something very real that actually happened in Kenya. Australian professor David Goldsworthy, in his landmark book on a man called Tom Mboya, the book was titled Tom Mboya, the man Kenya wanted to forget, made a mind-blowing revelation, in that book. Actually, this observation centered on a very fatal mistake Tom Mboya made. Tom Mboya was very smart, he was very clever. However, he made this mistake. And apart from this mistake, messing him up politically, it actually cost him his life. And this is what Goldsworthy said. Mboya did not realize that as long as Jaramogi Oginga Odinga remained in play, he remained relevant and indeed indispensable to State House and the Jomo Kenyatta administration, because they needed him to deal with Jaramogi Oginga Odinga. But as soon as Jaramogi Oginga Odinga was out of the way, then Mboya became vulnerable. He was no longer needed. He became dispensable. He suddenly became the only threat remaining for Jomo Kenyatta. And therefore his assassination was inevitable. In other words, had Mboya refused to finish Jaramogi, refused to take part in the plot to deal with Jaramogi, he would still be alive today, most probably. Now, fast forward to the present. The Kenyan people are very frustrated. They are going through unprecedented, difficult, crippling economic problems. And the convenient enemy put in front of the eyes of Kenyans is Deputy President William Samoei Ruto, and corruption. And everything was very okay until the gold manenos. Now, let us avoid the semantics here of who was involved, whether it was a private company involved, or how government is involved, or why the Dubai government is annoyed. Let's get rid of all those details. And let's just focus on one thing, which is the most important thing: the perception of the public. The perception is that all politicians are corrupt. And therefore, that has removed Deputy President William Samoei Ruto from being the main enemy. Now, I hope I've not lost you. I just hope I've not lost you. So, it is in the interest of the kieleweke people to try their best and to make this happen as soon as possible, to return William Samoei Ruto to his previous position, to his position before the goals come, so that he becomes the main punching bag, the enemy. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying William Ruto is clean. No. I'm just talking to you about political chess. And so the game plan for the kieleweke group is for the two handshake principles, to come out and talk to the people, being very careful to remind them the teams which are playing, and especially to remind them about the enemy, the enemy called corruption. And it is also in their best interests to expose those who are close to the deputy president who are involved in corruption, and to make revelations. This is very interesting. Those revelations are not being presented as evidence in court. They are being told to journalists so that it goes out there in the press, what Bwana Waititu, the governor of Kiambu, was up to. Allegedly. To make this clearer, just imagine a situation where Deputy President William Ruto was no longer there. The wrath of the public, the ugly mood in the country, would be targeted directly at the kieleweke group. This is why it is very sad, and indeed is major weakness, that Deputy President William Ruto plays his politics emotionally. Because it should be clear to most of you by now that his best tactic of dealing with the kieleweke group is to vanish, disappear. What does that mean? It means he dismantles the Tanga group, he stops campaigning, and then he looks, at least he appears, to be working very closely with President Uhuru Kenyatta and Raila Odinga. That simple move would dramatically change the politics, because no longer would the handshake team have an enemy. He would also have made an effort to move closer to Raila Odinga and work very closely with him. And the wrath of the public would be very quickly transferred to the kieleweke gang. And because Ruto is not a major player in the handshake, he would be in a good position to survive unscathed. If we were to take an example from combat, this is the classic judo throw, where somebody comes at you and you use their own momentum, not yours, theirs, their momentum and their strength, and you use your shoulder as a pivot, so that they're coming at you very fast with a lot of force, and you just use your shoulder as a pivot to even increase that force downwards, so your opponent lands down head first, finished. You have used their own momentum to finish them in this classic judo move, if you know anything about martial arts. But fortunately for kieleweke, they have nothing to worry about. William Ruto will always remain emotional. He will never, and indeed he has no history of making unemotional moves. So he will remain opposing the kieleweke group, through his allies, and he will remain the main enemy. And in the process, is playing right into the hands of his political opponents. Especially now, when Raila Odinga, and Uhuru Kenyatta are seeking, they're desperate to re-establish their position, as the good guys versus the bad guy. And so coming back to the point I started with, the handshake team cannot afford to completely finish the DP Ruto camp. In fact, it is in their best interests to ensure that the DP Ruto camp continues to thrive. Folks, what that means is that we'll continue to see these games being played. Meanwhile, nobody is going to be convicted for corruption. At least not anybody who is critical, in the Tanga group. And bear in mind, legislators and politicians from Central Province are more critical to the Tanga group than those from the Rift Valley. That, my friends, is the harsh reality of politics in Kenya at the moment. And so going forward, we should expect many more public appearances, by the handshake team, preferably separately. So Raila Odinga goes to Burma market, the president goes to Embakasi depot, to look at all the containers stuck and to issue directives. And it is very good for people like Ferdinand Waititu, to come out and thump their chests after they've been arrested and released and tell Kenyans there's nothing criminal about his arrest. It's all politics. Isn't that what Waititu has told us? Now, there's an interesting aside here I'd like to draw your attention to. Many Kenyans do not remember the time when Bwana Waititu was out of politics. He was bankrupt. He was photographed, on a social media page, walking around town, yeah, sweaty, and in some very worn out slippers. Imagine for a moment somebody who has money, who has a certain living standard, and then suddenly he has no money. What will that person do when he gets another chance? Yeah, when he comes into money again, he'll invest very prudently. And that explains one very fascinating thing that has come out of this Waititu issue. Yeah, it is said that he has various construction sites going on at the same time. He has purchased buildings, yeah, which are worth billions. It is very easy to see that this is a man who does not want that situation of walking around in worn-out slippers, bankrupt, to be repeated. Yeah, and so is making amends on the mistake he made the last time, which is okay. But of course the huge issue and the huge question is, where is he getting the funds, yeah, to make all these investments? Is he getting them through loans and the right way? Or is he getting them, yeah, from corruption? That is a question only a court of law can answer, yeah, and tell us, based of course on evidence. But that doesn't look like it's going to happen, because Waititu himself is talking about politics. Yeah, that his arrest has got nothing to do with the crimes he has committed. He's telling us he's clean. It all has to do with politics. And those who should be convicting Bwana Waititu, in case he's guilty, are not keeping their evidence for a court of law. They're taking the evidence and broadcasting it to Kenyans. Is that the right way to get a successful conviction? I don't think so. Because the first thing you do is that you also expose evidence very early to the person you want to convict. Which means they can start preparing the defense even before they land in court. It is just a matter of hiring smart lawyers and fixers, yeah, to dilute the evidence. In other words, the Waititu case, more than anything else, is a clear illustration to us that what is happening here is not a fight against corruption. What is happening here is just politics. Until next time, this is Chris Kumekucha.